What are weird jobs nobody knows about but they pay well? When you work as a government employee or contractor with a top secret clearance, after you retire or get laid off, you can work as an escort within classified facilities called SCIFs. Escorts are needed when an uncleared person needs to work in the SCIF. For example, it might be a top secret data center that needs an air conditioner repair. All the escort has to do is watch the repairman and stay with him throughout the visit. They usually just drag a chair over and sit there while getting paid damn good money. Story 2. You know how they have repo men to repossess cars of borrowers not keeping up with payments? Well, they also have repo men for yachts and private jets. I talked to an older guy with a pilot's license who was getting a lot of calls to join an outfit that does this, but he said he wasn't crazy about finding out what kind of security a guy in possession of a $10 million plane would have and what they would do to keep it. Story 3. You ever heard of an urban bat tracker? That's me. I'm the guy who steps into the night when the city sleeps, tracking the unseen ballet of bats against the backdrop of empty offices and starlit skies. My job is a blend of science and solitude. Armed with detectors that translate bat echolocation into something audible, I map their flight, study their behavior, and contribute to research that's vital for urban ecosystem conservation. It's not just a job, it's a commitment to understanding these misunderstood creatures of the night. The experience is surreal. As the world winds down, my work begins. I walk through parks and alleyways, under bridges, and alongside rivers. The city's nocturnal pulse becomes my soundtrack. A car horn here, a distant laughter there, all underlined by the constant rhythmic clicking of my bat detector. Each night is a lesson in patience and awe. Bats, these tiny, agile creatures, dart and dive in the darkness, almost like shadows flitting at the edge of my vision. There's a poetry in their flight, a kind of silent music that fills the night air. The pay is decent, surprisingly. It's a niche field, and expertise in urban wildlife ecology can be hard to come by. But it's not the money that keeps me here. It's the moments of connection, the feeling of being a part of something bigger and wilder, right in the heart of the city. Sometimes the most extraordinary things are hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered in the quiet symphony of the night. So this is definitely a job that I think you would have to be passionate about to take, regardless of what it pays. So glad that this poster here is getting kind of the best of both worlds and very that's not a word. Very well written. I kind of felt like I was reading a poem there. So yeah, that was cool. Thanks for sharing. Story 4. I had a boyfriend in Oklahoma who got state wages for going into backwoods and down dirt roads to find trash people dumped. His job was to report the trash for others to clean up, but most importantly, he had to sift through the trash to find anything that would identify who dumped the trash. I went with him a few times and I felt like a detective. It was quite fun. Edit. For those that asked, I do not remember the name of the position, and Google was no help. I did find this, post the link, which seems similar. For some reason, the only name that comes to mind is manhole cover. Sorry, that was 23 years ago and my memory is not that sharp. Story 5. Not that weird, but lesser known. I'm a focus group moderator, which means I sit in a conference room with a group of about 8 people and lead a discussion about whatever product or brand I'm working for. The groups are usually 90 minutes or 2 hours tops, and for in-person, I get paid $2,000 per group. Virtual groups are a little less, but still excellent rates. Story 6. I was once a pine cone harvester. A helicopter would cut off the tops of trees and bring them to us to pick off the pine cones, which would then go to tree planters to germinate and plant. $35 to fill a 5-gallon bucket. Experienced pickers would fill 2.5 an hour, but the sap getting all over your clothes, skin, and hair is very annoying and a big deterrent for most. Story 7. I don't even know the name for this, but a friend takes care of rich people's cars for a living. Pick up the car for maintenance, takes the car from A to B, etc. He doesn't actually work on the cars, he just works for rich people that don't have the time to take care of the car. It's super well paid, is on a first-name basis with some of the richest people in the country. Apparently isn't easy to find trustworthy people to take care of your cars, plus access to your properties and so on. Story 8. Ship pilot, especially ice pilots. You need a decent amount of experience, but it's not unheard of for people's day rates to be in the multiple thousands. And if anything goes wrong, technically and legally it's the captain's fault. Story 9. I'm often told that people have no idea my job exists, and I make pretty good money. $145K this year. I trade energy between different power companies on the West Coast, send instructions to power plants, and then schedule the energy to flow along transmission lines. The schedule is part of the reason for the high salary. I work 12-hour shifts, and in a 5-week period, I work 7-day shifts, 7 overnight shifts, and have 21 days off. I do this from home more than half the time, so that's a sweet perk too. Edit. Should have disclosed that I live in an HCOL area, which does inflate my compensation a little bit. Edit 2. Since there may be some curiosity, power does not trade like stocks in a stock exchange, for the most part. Stock shares do not evenly equate to energy for many reasons. I also do not benefit from the profitability of trades I make, but the utility's power customers do. The main reason here is because what if I just didn't secure enough power and people are blacked out because I deemed it non-profitable? My P&L is tracked solely for performance appraisals and promotions. My compensation is 85% annual salary and 5% annual cash bonus as long as we do not lose money for our customers. Story 10. My aunt and her daughter both do seasonal work as hand pollinators, harvesters. Certain types of plants, saffron, vanilla orchids, have very small windows of time when you can pollinate or harvest them from a couple of hours to half a day. So the growers need people who can work fast and delicately to hand pollinate or harvest whatever plant they're growing. Plus, if the plant is small and they grow in the ground, it's a lot of bending to get down and do whatever has to be done, especially if they have a whole field of tiny flowers and you're using tweezers or a tiny paintbrush. My auntie and cousin have been doing it for years now. They always get called back and make a lot of money for 1 to 2 days of work. Story 11. In New York City, and probably only in New York City, you can be a professional wait-in-line person. You wait in line for a theater ticket or a seat at a famous restaurant, lines that take hours. A tourist who doesn't want to wait and has a full itinerary will happily pay you to stand in for them so that they can see the show or eat at the famous restaurant later that day. If there's one thing that we can learn from this video, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come, it's that there is a lot of profit in taking advantage of people's laziness. Things that people don't want to do with their time and would rather do other things, they will pay you to simply keep them from having to do it. And this is a perfect example. Don't want to wait in line, which, I don't blame a tourist. If you're only in New York City for the weekend, you don't want to spend 5, 6, 7 hours waiting in line for a ticket to eat somewhere, so you pay someone else to do it. But just in a general sense, doing things for people that they ordinarily or easily could do themselves, that's the easiest way to make money, especially if these people have a lot of money to pay you. Story 12. I have a buddy who gets to remove or kill things on a runway. Alligators, bees, deer, birds. If it's on the active runway, no matter what it is, it gets shot and removed. Very rarely do they have to do this. I think my buddy's been doing it 5 years now and hasn't had to shoot anything, but he has had to remove alligators from nearby ponds and spray for hornets and such, around $30 an hour. How do you shoot a bee? I mean, you'd have to be a heck of a sniper to pop a bee out of the sky with a rifle. I'm just being silly, I know what he meant. Story 13. I met an infusion nurse who told me about her job. She worked 3 12-hour shifts per week at a smaller clinic in a metro area. She'd hook patients up to an IV and give them their chemotherapy or MS drugs or whatever else was prescribed. Hook them up and monitor for problems, which was less than 1% of the time, and those she sent to the ER. She made over $100 an hour. It took a bunch of specialized training, a couple of years, if I recall correctly, to be familiar with the drugs, but said it was no more than most specialized nurses. And since her field was understaffed, she could do it probably forever if she wanted. Story 14. IT auditor. I work with financial auditors who ensure that businesses are doing what they say they are in terms of data protection, access control, cybersecurity, software development, etc. It is a lot of, what are your policies and procedures? Do you follow them? Do they map to NIST/ISO/other frameworks and best practices? There's a lot of asking questions and ensuring people are doing what they should be doing. Occasionally, you discover fraud or incompetence and get a VP fired. It requires decent IT skills, lots of continuing education, strong soft skills, and a solid bullcrap detector. I work mostly remote. I get European levels of vacation with American IT pay and no mandatory overtime. I get paid to do training, attend conferences, and get certs and CPEs built into my regular hours. Story 15. I drive around and look at parking lot lights at night, making sure there are no outages. I don't fix it, I report it in an app, and the guys with the bucket truck show up later. It's part of the overall service my company provides. It's a monthly fee, and I pretty much have a set list of properties I visit either once a month or once a quarter. The pay isn't exceptional, but I basically get paid to listen to podcasts, so no complaints here. They also pay mileage. Properly, so no tax. Maybe not exactly an answer to the question, but yeah, there's someone that does that. Story 16. Cytotechnologist here. One sentence summation of my career is that I screen pap smears for a living. The specimens come from the OGBYN to the laboratory where they get processed on slides, stained and cover slipped, then brought to our department for microscopic view. Main thing we're looking for are cellular abnormalities known as dysplasia. We mark the cells in question, then forward to the pathologist for final interpretation. If no abnormalities are found, the cytotech can release those cases without MD review. We do find actual cancer from time to time, but the primary purpose of our job, and the pap test, is to find dysplasia before it turns malignant. The pay is very good these days, anywhere from $35 to $70 per hour, depending on your experience level and location. Education level is a Bachelor of Science degree, then completing an accredited cytotechnology program, which is normally another year. The technology has upgraded from simply using a microscope to many laboratories use semi-automated screening, where the computer will show you what it thinks are the most significant fields of view for you to examine. And we're looking at completely digital screening in the near future, where these fields of view are displayed on a monitor. That said, the human is still the final arbiter of what is negative and abnormal, for now at least. I have absolutely no idea what any of that means. What a nerd. And I love it. I'm here for it. The world needs more people that are passionate about cytotechnology, or whatever this is about. So good for you. Make that money. Story 17. I used to work for a landlord doing maintenance on his properties. I had free rent and made $3K a month. This was late 90s into the early 2000s. It was a good gig. I had a truck he gave me, and I would go around mowing lawns, shoveling snow, light repairs, any major repairs he sent to the contracting company he owned. I'd call them and a guy would be over a few hours. Problem out of my hands. Story 18. Corrugated fiberboard structural engineer / designer, which is a long-winded way to say that I design cardboard boxes for a living. I make pretty decent money too. I spend my day in a design lab. Think large, mostly empty room with a lot of corrugated cardboard sheets and a few large CNC flatbed cutting machines. I use a program called RTOS CAD to draw a flattened box shape, essentially how it looks before being glued / folded up / assembled. And then that drawing is converted into a physical cutting die to be used on machinery in the factory portion of where I work. It's incredibly fun work and really makes you think about the packaging industry as a whole. We try to avoid non-paper materials at all costs, so our products, the boxes, tend to be very environmentally friendly. We also source all our paper from ecologically friendly corrugators who own land and grow trees instead of buying them from deforesters. A lot of my job is making really simple boxes for everyday items. Your typical cardboard box style, 4 flaps on top and bottom, but I get to do more interesting stuff pretty often, like displays. Think the cardboard displays you see in grocery store aisles, and also unique packaging that has to protect the product inside. Story 19. A lot of people might already know this. Everyone focuses on how much movie stars make, but the blue-collar crew members make a pretty penny as well. Not millions for one project, obviously, but 6 figures a year type of good. Think boom op, a greens person, plants, or some dude running cable to power the sets. These people make good money. Story 20. Banquet serving. Rich people, parties, wedding, etc. Same with banquet bartending too. If your hotel / company pays for the servers a percentage of the gratuity, hourly can jump up to $50+ an hour, with cash tips on the bar. Unionized property? $60 to $70 during the busy season. Business is a bit slow in the winter, but with proper money management, it's a lovely time off. I used to travel internationally during the slow season. Story 21. I sell software. $90K base plus commission. Work from home and realistically work about 10 hours a week at most. Using the free time to get certified and land an enterprise account executive role, making $150K plus base, plus commission working about 30 hours a week. I have a bachelor's and master's in an art-related field and freelanced for 15 years before getting into this. Story 22. Medical physicist. Every hospital that utilizes x-rays, CT scanners, MRI, etc. has one of us behind the curtains testing and monitoring the machines. We don't work with patients directly, so not many people outside of the hospital employees realize how vital we are to these systems. Story 23. My SO builds trails. It's a job I never considered until we met. I'm much more aware of my trail etiquette, knowing people have put a lot of time and effort into making a trail for me to walk on. Bad news is, he only occasionally will come hiking since he spends so much time already on trail. It's like going to work for him. Although when he does come with, it is fun to get his perspective on the state of a trail and hear his thoughts on how it can be improved. You know, I myself actually had a short summer job doing this one time, basically clearing land for trails, jumping on a bush hog and, knocking down trees and forging paths through woodlands and stuff like that. It's kind of fun, but also scary because you never know what you're going to run up on. Several times we encountered like snake nests and hornets' nests and stuff like that and ended up, getting stung and chased out of there. So if you're someone that sort of fears the unknown, maybe not a good line of work, but it is fun and also satisfying to basically be the final say in how a trail that many people are going to walk on is ultimately laid out. So that's pretty cool. Story 24. I worked as an organ deliverer. Forgot the official title for around a year. Job was simple. I was stationed in the biggest hospital in my state. If an organ donation was received that needed to go to another hospital for a transplant, it was my job to move it. I was paid $40 an hour to most nights sit on my ass in the break room and watch TV or play on my phone. I'd probably only have to deliver something once a week at most. It was an okay job, except that it was boring as crap, since the hospital I was stationed at did 95% of all the organ transplants in my state. And the other major hospital that did them was around 3 hours away, and you wouldn't ever have to go up north to it. Lots of pay to sit around, but, well, I wasn't exactly feeling fulfilled career-wise. Story 25. PCB cloner here. All machines/gadgets have complicated circuits. It is the first part that fries. Replacements are rarely available as models change, companies shut down, and instruments get old. Only few people know the work that I do, but it is a very demanding job. Not easy to understand logic and design and copy new PCB. My other job is earworm remover. Both jobs pay well, but the first one pays really well. Only problem is, I cannot copy secret government PCB. That is a no-no. My expertise is restricted to household gadgets, old scientific instruments, old control systems in industries. Story 26. I once went to an old guy's house up in the mountains. Old in that he died and his daughter was trying to sell off his assets. He was in the process of building a 4,000 square foot underground house. The house was pretty much there without any outer walls. All the support pillars were there with the roof and had been covered with earth. There were channels in the floor for electricity, but hadn't been wired yet. There were about 5 C-trains or semi-trailers full of super high-end machinery. Herrig surface grinders, SIP jig borers, lathes, mills. You could see that the deepest part of the house was going to be the machining area. The daughter said he made his money making stamps for stamping Best Buy dates on the bottom of beer cans on a pantograph. That's a pretty niche skill. Story 27. Script coverage for the entertainment industry used to be like this. No idea if it still is. Reading screenplays and deciding whether a studio should consider it for a production. You're expected to pass about 95% of the time, with a short synopsis. If you're a fast reader, you can make $1,000 or more a day, but the work can be feast or famine. Can also lead to entry-level production work if you have a good nose for hits. Story 28. Farrier, aka trimming hooves and nailing shoes onto animal feet. The trick is only a handful of states have a school that offers a good farrier program, and not many farriers have the time for an apprentice, so relocating for a school is the best opportunity. If you have the guts and skill to trim/dress hooves, you'll make a killing and can live and work just about anywhere in the world. Story 29. Touring music industry tech. I pull about $150K. Varies with how much work I get and how well I negotiate my rate. There are quite a few of us, though not enough if you're interested. I have an eye-watering selection of specialized skills. I mostly work in lighting and automation. I used to be an electric engineer. Downside, you're away from home long periods, and the hours can be awful. Story 30. I designed railroad crossings. The gates, signals, bungalow, etc. No degree needed, just the on-job experience. Paid great. People were usually surprised when I told them what I did. Story 31. So you ever see job postings for oil field services? Yeah, it's not just welders and pipe fitters. The guy we asked to jump in a truck and drive a box of gauges out to West Texas makes $40 an hour plus overtime. Once you spend 2 to 3 years in the oil industry, you realize everyone makes over $100K a year. Story 32. I work in commercial refrigeration, and one of the more lucrative jobs at my company, ice cream machines. We sell/service soft serve machines that are upwards of $35K, lol. Pay tops out at about $60 an hour, and we have one guy for the whole state. Customers happily pay for full drive time to and from Seattle to Yakima, Washington, lol. Much worse ways to make $60 an hour, haha. Story 33. Here's a couple I could think of off the top of my mind. Let me know what you think. 1. Professional cuddler. Some people are willing to pay for platonic companionship and physical touch. Professional cuddlers provide comfort through hugs and cuddling sessions. 2. Pet food tester. Quality control in the pet food industry involves human taste testers to ensure the product meets safety and taste standards. And 3. Foley artist. These sound effects experts create everyday sounds for movies and TV shows. From footsteps to rustling leaves, their work enhances the audio experience. I'm sorry, but there is no sum of money you could pay me to eat dog food for a living. That is disgusting. But obviously there are people out there that are fine with that and do that. And once again, it's just finding yourself, your niche in life. So yeah, open up a can. Story 34. I operate the transmission electric grid. Not a lot of people know that a bunch of nerds sitting in a control room all day are the last line of defense to a large-scale blackout or nuclear plants losing off-site power. I love my job, get paid pretty well, but when I describe what I do to other people, they usually have a lot of questions, lol. Story 35. I create synthetic data to train artificial intelligence versus using real data like images. For instance, instead of training an AI to recognize facial expressions by feeding it millions of images of real people's faces with a description, I create 3D renders of human faces with infinite variations, programmatically. It's very similar to working as a video game designer, but at much larger scales. Pays extremely well. Currently working at Meta. Story 36. I know a woman in New Jersey who makes soup from November to March and goes to all the cold outdoor events and sets up shop. Clears $60K and then sells ice cream the rest of the year, making around $90K with that. Her daughter quit her job as a pharmacist to take over the business. Story 37. Being a manager for a travel company. I can be at home or anywhere really. I just have to have my work phone and work laptop with me all the time. I handle finding job sites for the travel employees and handle logistics such as booking their flights, rental cars, etc. Might sound easy, but trust me, it's overwhelming sometimes. Phone calls left or right. Sometimes employees are struggling with delayed flights, or those calls I get at 3 a.m. to help out a new hire employee who traveled overnight and got a flat tire on the interstate so I can give them advice on what to do. Story 38. Underwater welders make a F-ton of money. You have to become dive certified and know how to weld. Then you do that, fixing boats that are too big to be lifted out of the water and repairing bridges that are underwater and crap. Guy who changed a blown-out trailer tire was telling me about this. Texas has the best training program, he found out. Story 39. I used to build ski lifts, which was pretty niche in and of itself, but the real gem was the person who, once all the towers were up on the main rope was ran, came down to splice the rope into a continuous line. Our guy was one of just 6 old-timers in the country who did tow rope splicing for ski lifts, tramways, etc., and got paid very, very well. But he basically lived 10 months out of the year traveling the country in his pickup truck, so his home life wasn't of very high quality. And the arthritis and scarring on his hands from decades of manipulating steel rope is probably the reason why not many people are willing to take over the reins. Story 40. Falconry. Saw a dude holding a falcon standing in a large corporate campus. I asked him what he was doing. He said he was hired by major corporate campuses to keep pigeons away for $30K a year. One falcon can keep a 100K square foot facility free of pigeon crap, and it's worth every penny when they have all these courtyard gathering spaces with expensive landscaping. He patrols 3 different campuses a week. Story 41. I don't know if it's weird, but it's a job surprisingly low amount of people know about. Contract specialist. I work for one of those federal agencies. I work Monday through Fridays, all federal holidays off, and my schedule never changes. Money is great, and because of the agency I work for, I can do overtime to my heart's content when I want to. When I started the job, I didn't realize most people don't know what I do. I can do the same thing on the civilian side once I get my retirement out of the way. Story 42. It's not that strange of a job, but most people don't realize how much dealership service and parts can make. It's a wide range, but depending on where you live and what line you work for, a counterperson can make $100K plus for basically looking up, ordering, and pulling auto parts. Service advisors are the same. Again, location and make dependent, but I know some who make well over six figures. Story 43. I have a friend that does land management for those places that offer hunts for rich people. He'll dress the property, for lack of a better term, to make the ideal conditions for quail or hogs or deer or whatever. He flies around in his little dinky plane checking on tree cover and looking for bedding areas and whatnot. A big part of his job is blowing up beaver dams and killing wild hogs. He has a side business, sighting and rifles. He said once that he thought God created HOTS for the sole purpose of sighting and rifles. Interesting dude. Story 44. Our water just stopped working one day and we had to hire a leak detection specialist. He charged $600 for the first hour and $150 for each hour after that, with a minimum of 2 hours. So he's doing all right. Fixed our water in like 3 hours though. After it had been broken for 3 days and multiple other professions had said, never seen that before. Story 45. Digital forensics. You handle evidence that involves computers, hard drives, cell phones, etc. for court cases and sometimes get to hack into phones or dig through hard drives looking for stuff that's hidden. I took a class on it. It seemed really interesting, and then talked to someone who did it for their career, who told me in no uncertain terms to find a different field to work in. Apparently, you see a lot of really awful stuff on a daily basis and have to testify in court pretty often, but you make decent money with really good benefits. This is the classic question of, is the money worth it? So if you make quote-unquote decent money, but are constantly being subpoenaed and having to testify in court and seeing things, that are disturbing, potentially making you more paranoid. Personally, I don't think it's worth it, but, again, it's a niche. Someone's got to do it. Story 46. I'm a caretaker in a resort area that I live. I have 8 clients and make about $3,000 per client per month. I check on their home, inspect landscaping, start and drive their cars for a bit each month. I fix any minor issues, light bulbs, leaky faucets, and contract out larger repairs. The day before they arrive, usually a few days or weeks, I Instacart food orders, make sure everything is ready to go for them. It's a lot of fun. I drive Ferraris, Maybachs, and all types of cool cars. Story 47. If anyone has a suggestion for a career in the medical field / laboratory / etc. that makes at least $100K a year starting, with preferably a bachelor's but master's is fine too, please let me know. I'm in school now for radiation therapy, but I don't think it's going to pay enough even though I enjoy it. I really enjoy helping others. Radiation therapy is very rewarding. I love being there for my patients. The money is just not what I'm looking for. Also, I really don't want to be a nurse. Props to all the nurses out there though. IDK, how y'all do it? Story 48. I'm a greenhouse grower, aka bonafide plant nerd. Worked in the garden section of HD for years, then decided to finally get my degree. Still growing plants, but on a much larger scale. Been out of school for 5 years now. Grow my own crops, got a company truck, and the money is great. But the crop never ends. Traditional field growers get an off-season, but greenhouses go 365 days a year. There's a huge demand and small talent pool, so growers are in very high demand. Story 49. People know the field, but not the details. I'm in cybersecurity sales, specifically banks, but sometimes other companies. You know that FDIC protection? It comes with a stipulation. Annually, those banks have to be tested by a company like ours for security risks. So my job is to convince banks to let my team try to steal from them, and they have to do it, so basically whoever calls them first gets the job. I get 10% of basic runs and 30% of our big jobs, where we're dressing as cleaners and making copies of ID cards to spoof, etc. Our bottom shelf service is $50K, and for a full team 2-week test, it's $500K. I'm a good salesman, so usually it's something in between. Best part of my job is debriefing the client as we go. Contract has upper management and executives in on us doing it, watching us do it, but they can't tell anyone at the bank. So they sit and sweat, seeing my guys get closer and closer. That's if the first day doesn't immediately crack them open with an email. Hey, this is Bob in IT and we need your credentials. Those are fun. My favorite was showing a Fortune 500 entertainment company CFO footage of my 20-year-old intern convincing his secretary to let him into the entire financial system where he took $100 million. He called her as a work-from-home security consultant, put on an hour-long YouTube video of baby crying noises, and kept apologizing as he slowly turned the volume up every few minutes. The fact my team almost never has to actually hack anything says a lot about how easy it is to get people to give up sensitive info. Story 50. Buddy of mine works as a server maintenance technician. Does it from home most of the time, but travels occasionally for on-site tasks. Most of his job is literally just remotely accessing servers and checking for things like available storage, pending updates, and in cases where important processes have stopped or a service is down, he's the one that goes in and gets things going again. Dude makes around $100K a year just to do cleanup and make sure things are updated properly. Story 51. Sometimes being a poll worker can be good money. We had a referendum last month and I worked as an absentee voting officer. Worked 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m., attended a 1-hour training session, and came in for 2 hours the night before to help our booth supervisor set up, as their 2IC was sick or something. All up, I got paid about $740. For the day itself, our booth was super quiet, so I spent half the day sitting at a desk waiting for something to happen. The next day, I helped at a depot counting ballots for 9 hours and got paid $46 an hour. Then again, working during the week is not good money as it only pays $29 an hour. Story 52. Medical Unit Secretary. Most of the jobs being posted require a lot of education or years of experience/training. Do I make $100K a year? Hell no. Is it a great starter job? Yes. Pays much better than a fast food job with none of the stress or standing on your feet. I've worked in my hospital system for 13 years under various titles. Had I known that unit secretaries were a thing, I would have started here. I work nights, 3 nights a week, 12 hours a shift. They have day shift positions if you're not a natural night owl. I work on the NICU now. We're a lockdown unit, so I basically verify IDs of visitors and make sure they're allowed to visit. Other duties include answering phones, typing up assignment sheets, ordering supplies, admitting and discharging newborns from the unit. Most shifts I do about 3 to 5 hours of actual work and a whole lot of nothing. This is a great job for college students, moms and dads, and semi-retired folks. We get to make our own schedules and pick up extra shifts if needed. I used to drag my carcass into an exhausting and depressing job 5 days a week. Now with shift diffs, I make more in 3 days than I did working 5 days a week. I love it because it gives me a lot of free time for my hobbies. There's no standard education for this job, but customer service experience, knowledge of medical technology, and proper telephone etiquette are a good start. Sometimes I get floated to other units. Right now, I'm sitting on the 6th floor unit because they needed one more person for their ratios. I'm getting paid to literally do F all for 12 hours. I'm not driving a Tesla or anything, but my bills are paid and I live comfortably. Perfect job for lazy folks like me. Story 53. During COVID, my career was put on hold, so I started working for a restoration company that also did a ton of homicide/self-unalive cleanups. They paid around $35 an hour, your food if you could eat, and your gas. After about 7 or 8 months, I quit. The amount of young kids who take their life was very depressing, unnerving, and it started taking a toll on my health. My drinking skyrocketed at home. Story 54. As a sideline, I have a friend who is paid to do cyber sex. She basically has an avatar she parks on a bed, and the client plays with the animations while she interacts with him by writing explicit stuff in real time, all while doing other things like watching Netflix, for example. All she needs is writing skills and a bit of imagination. There's no physical interaction, such as cam or voice. She easily makes $30K per year for about 10 hours of work per week. Mind-blowing. Story 55. I have 2 weird ones. In the day, I'm a government banker. I meet with government officials and help them with lending, liquidity, and payments technology. This involves lots of conferences, which are basically giant parties, leading complex fintech implementations, and driving through beautiful countries to perform in-person meetings with out-of-the-way counties and cities. Pay starts at $100K plus, and by late career, you can easily clear $300K. By night, I'm a mix engineer, receiving audio files from clients over the internet and making their home recordings sound like professionally made songs. This one is less of a consistent job and more of a gig economy thing, but once you have a good reputation, you can easily make a few hundred for a few hours of work. Story 57. Engineering designer. I work in civil, but you'll find us in other fields. Someone has to do all the design work, and typically engineers are caught up in so much project management that dedicated designers are needed to design projects using CAD and whatever other software is relevant to the field. In my case, that means designing pipe networks, grading, site layouts, fully remote for around $100K a year. It's not super exciting, but it's in pretty high demand, and the skills aren't hard to pick up. Story 58. I used to do autopsies on failed microprocessors. My job title was Failure Analysis Engineer, but I like the autopsy description better. It was one of the best jobs I ever had. Everyone was a bit different, and you usually only had one shot at figuring it out, or it was destroyed forever. Plus, I got to use a lot of interesting science toys like electron microscopes. It's a job that can pay well, but you generally need to become an electrical engineer to get into it. Plus, it's really hard now. Story 59. I know a guy who has his own Sheck/OSHA consultancy. He gets paid to go to places and then tell them if they would pass or fail a healthy and safety audit and how to fix it. I'm oversimplifying, but it seems like good hours and great pay. I know he was on a 14-night cruise with his wife. He did a couple of days' work on his laptop while on the cruise, and the money he generated from that paid for said cruise. Story 60. In 2008, I got a job as a technician that surfaced frac pumps. We would travel to oil fields and service the frac equipment and trucks on weekends when they were shut down. We would get paid commission based on the number of units we serviced. A pump would be between $4 to $6K each, depending on the model, and crews of 3 would split 20%. Other equipment was less based on size. I got paid $500 per week and a commission check that was $2,400 on the low end and between $4 to $5K on the high end. The best part was the schedule. I got to the shop to check out the service truck and trailer about 7 to 8 a.m. Friday. We'd head out to the site, about 1.5 hours away, and unload the filters we used the prior week in a storage facility. Then we'd go get whatever equipment we needed to service until about 6 p.m., then head back to our hotel. Wake up at 6 a.m. Saturday and head out, work all day until dark. Wake up again Sunday and work until the scheduled equipment was serviced, anywhere from noon to 4 p.m. Head back to base and clean out the truck, then off for the rest of the week until Friday. My first year on the job, I made $87K, $126K in today's dollars. It was a dirty job, but I loved it. Story 61. A bereavement coordinator is someone who helps families with terminally ill or recently deceased loved ones. They manage everything from paperwork to appointments, handling the funeral service and supervising volunteers and staff so that the family going through a difficult time doesn't have to. A bereavement coordinator position is a type of counseling service as well, and you might be responsible for arranging counseling for the bereaved when necessary. With a job like this, you would generally work in hospitals, nursing homes, or in hospice settings. Story 62. I work in tissue recovery. It pays well enough considering you don't need a degree. $30 to $45 per hour, plus lots of random bonuses. You need a strong stomach for the smells, sounds, and the ability to handle traumatic visuals. You need to be okay with death and having patients ranging from newborn to 70-something. It takes place in an operating room typically, but I've helped with a heart recovery, for valves, organs as a separate team and always in an OR, in a funeral home basement once. I recovered the cornea as well. We recover skin, bones, tendons, nerves, vasculature, valves, AI, and a few other things. If you apply for this type of job, you get to shadow a case mid-interview process, but mostly to make sure you can handle it and not pass out. iBanking was another fun job that paid well and wasn't too common or known. Story 63. I work at a not super common job, but a field that's always in need. I'm a NASSCO inspector. I pilot robotic cameras down storm and sanitary systems to determine issues and map it out. I make about $2K a week, with about 50% of the year traveling, but home on the weekends. My company works with townships and towns who give us their maps. We bring in jetting equipment to clean the lines, then the video lines. We then locate all of the points of access and issues with survey equipment to create a GIS map for the client. We also do remediation and other types of work, but it's always different each day. Job only requires basic computer knowledge and only a high school GED equivalent. Only downside is dealing with sewage, but you get enough PPE that it doesn't ever become an issue. Every town, city, etc. needs this kind of work, and some areas of the US pay over $90 an hour for this type of work. Story 64. People really underestimate sales roles. I work in the real estate industry in Dubai, and the successful people are making about $250,000 US dollars tax-free a year. Top earners make around $10 million US dollars tax-free. 70% make less than $15,000 US dollars. The barrier of entry is zero. Anyone and everyone can be an agent, but only the real salesmen make good money. Merit speaks for itself. Story 65. Airport operations. We drive around taxiways and runways looking for things that broke. Every airport that has airlines fly there has an operations team. 50-50 shot on the pay. Some airports pay essentially minimum wage and others will pay towards $100K. Absolutely no in between. Pretty chill gig and usually great benefits. Story 66. Packaging science. The people that design how things are packed. Very easy degree and it pays well. It was the major that had the most transfers from other majors at my school as it had a good guaranteed starting salary. Story 67. Insurance actuary isn't a job that gets much attention but pays very well indeed. As the job requires advanced mathematics skills, there's a high barrier to entry and that keeps competition down. On a different level, there are the people you see in supermarkets handing out free food samples. Most work for outside contractors rather than the supermarkets, and it's not uncommon for the assignments to pay upward of $25 an hour. While it's rarely, if ever, a full-time job, working a couple of shifts a week is a nice way to supplement one's income. Story 68. When I lived overseas as a kid on an Air Force base, we had a guy come in and talk to our class about his job on the runway that he was contracted to do by the base. His job was to sit on the runway and have his trained hawk chase off any other birds that got near the runway. Apparently, birds can do some pretty severe damage to aircraft if sucked through the engines. It was an awesome experience talking to him and seeing the bird, and it seemed like an even cooler job. Story 69. Body retrieval and transport. I once met a couple who did this, and they described it to me. Apparently, they made really good money, upper middle class, just the two of them. They were on call 24/7, 5 or 6 days a week, and they said they did about 15 to 25 hours of work a week. They would just go about their lives, waiting for a call that someone had died and needed to be picked up. They'd load up the corpse and bring it to whatever funeral home was serving the family, then go back to whatever they were doing. The downsides were pretty obvious. Gotta be okay with dead bodies, sometimes someone dies in the middle of the night, and sometimes the body would be a very heavy person, which is physically difficult to handle, or a kid, which is emotionally difficult to handle. But this couple worked minimal hours and had a nice house, drove nice cars, and got to spend a lot of time together. And I didn't know if it was by choice or just the nature of their particular job, but they didn't deal with any of the really messy bodies. They only picked up fresh, whole corpses. Then they went and cashed fat checks. Story 70. When you call an office and the machine says the call will be recorded for quality maintenance, I'm quality assurance. The company I work for gives feedback on new patient calls for dental practices specifically to help with new client acquisition and retention. Might not be weird to anyone else, but I didn't believe it was a real job when I first heard about it, lol. And it pays well, IMO, considering we don't actually talk to anyone. Starting $15 an hour full-time with regular and easily attainable bonuses, plus semi-regular promotions/raises. Story 71. My BIL used to travel around the world putting up roller coasters, or dismantling them for relocation. It was a great job while he was young and single. When there wasn't a gig for him, he just went back to working with his state's traveling carnival. Saw the world, all expenses paid. He's one of only a handful of guys in the world that do this. Or at least that was the case 25 years ago. Once he wanted to settle down, he got a job at a full-time carnival/amusement park and maintains their old timber roller coaster. He gets to dictate terms because he's one of only 2 guys in the country that knows how to do it, and the company keeps neglecting to hire anyone for him to train up. Story 72. Election Assistant Scrutineer. You watch the polling process. From the setup of the booths, the crossing off of names, the people voting outside the electorate, the counting process, the packing up process, and escort the counted ballots to the designated collection point, all to make sure there are no errors, lost votes, double voters, etc. It's fascinating and pays well. Story 73. I have several, all related as to industry/where they are performed. Deconner. Performing cleaning of radioactive contaminated services. Radiation protection technician. Check for contamination and radiation levels to inform the workers and advise them how to prevent overexposure. Generator jumper. Usually men of small stature. Enter the steam generator of a nuclear power plant to examine the tubes. Involves high radiation exposure. Pays very well. Most trades are needed for work in nuclear plants. That last one just seems almost too ridiculous to be true. We're going to pay you very well. Oh, but by the way, you're going to have very, very high exposure levels to radiation. No big deal. If you're cool with that, potentially getting radiation poisoning and dying, I hope the salary's worth it. That's ridiculous. Story 74. I'm a bank rep in auto finance. My job is 80% of the time just hanging out at car dealerships making friends with the managers. I get a budget to take people to lunch and to bring branded merchandise to pass out. A few times a year, we get corporate budget for big events where we rent out a cool venue and bring 100+ dealers. Sometimes it's a pain in the ass, because I also have to deal with the shady nonsense dealers sometimes do. But to be honest, it's pretty rare. Every time I tell people what I do, they seem confused, lol. It's a good job though. You just really need to be friendly. Story 75. I'm an aircraft dispatcher. The general public has no idea my job exists. I'm basically a pilot on the ground that supports the flight crews from my company's flights. I don't make crazy money with my current company, but if you go and work for a big name airline, you can make 6 figures easy. Story 76. Water treatment plant operator at your local water company. Every water company is short on licensed operators. Takes anywhere from 1 to 5 years to get licensed depending on the state. Also, no education is needed other than high school diploma. The pay carts, but after I got my level 4s, I now make $97K, but I work some holidays and every weekend. Story 77. Probably not well known, but maybe lesser known? Or don't know they make a lot? My ex-MIL is a nurse anesthetist, who is basically the nurse that keeps patients knocked out during surgery and wakes them up after. I never knew they did most of the work. I know anesthesiologists existed and assumed they were the ones, but she makes $225,000 a year, with optional overtime, and that's in an LCOL area. Story 78. Not weird as such, but definitely on the less known side of things. Subject teacher in a big international school. Salaries range from good to fairly large tax-free retire at 50 levels, and if you're teaching a couple, then yeah, nice. Teaching in international schools is an absolute dream. There is pressure, but it's pressure to be a good educator, not a behavioral manager. I taught in the UK for 8 years and it nearly destroyed me. Moved overseas, and for the last 20 years, I can count the number of incidents of disruptive behavior in the classroom on one hand. Seriously, if you're a jaded teacher with a passion for actually teaching and have the ability to jump into international teaching, do it. The worst that can happen is you're back home within a term or semester because it's not for you. The best case scenario? You retire at 50 owning multiple properties after the most rewarding work experience imaginable. Story 79. I have a female friend who asked me if it was strange to accept $3,000 per month from a handicapped man overseas asking to belittle him via text messages. I'm of two minds here. 1. Screw it. Take the money and use it for smart investments in your own life. 2. That is morally wrong, and you should invest your time as an intelligent adult into something that serves your long-term success. I may need other opinions. What are your thoughts on this? I think that since the harassment is consensual, it's okay, it's kosher, it's above board, so I say go for it. That's easy money. Plus, who doesn't like to vent and get out their frustrations by belittling other people? It could sort of be cathartic for both sides, I think. Go for it. Get that $3K a month. Story 80. Supply and demand. If you have a trait that a small subsection of the population has, like an elite painter, athlete, money. If you went to college to obtain a degree in a field that few are in and there's a higher demand, money. If you're willing to start your own business and put in the grind to success, money. Unions. I don't work for one, but have customers who are union that are struggling to find people willing to go through the trade. Low supply. Money. If you're just wanting a higher paying entry-level position, supply and demand. Warehouses are becoming the new factory work jobs in my neck of the woods. They need a lot of employees. High demand. Sanitation workers. Fewer people want these jobs. Low supply. Story 81. Obscure but well-paying jobs include Foley artists who create sound effects for movies, professional cuddlers offering non-sexual support, ethical hackers securing digital systems, and conlangers crafting fictional languages for entertainment. These roles cater to niche demands, often escaping mainstream recognition but commanding high compensation due to specialized skills and unique expertise. Exploring unconventional career paths can unveil hidden opportunities for financial success in unexpected places. Story 82. In general, I think there are many different works in the world that few people know about. This is strongly influenced by the locality and culture where the result of this work will be in demand. I've always been surprised by the position of the author of predictions and cookies, because for someone it may seem very simple and unimportant work, but one day I discovered such cookies and received very important words for myself. Believe in yourself and you'll succeed. I was so excited when I read this prediction that I even felt as if someone or something had put a healing plaster on my heart. It's amazing how a few letters combined into words can have a huge impact on a person's entire life. Therefore, I think that by working as the author of the prediction, you earn not only money, but also do good deeds that can help people in difficult moments of their lives. Story 83. Land Surveying Field Crew. Start off as a rodman/laborer at $20 an hour currently, and be making $30 plus an hour in less than 5 years as a party chief after learning how to do the job on the job. Story 84. There's this one commerce job called an actuarist who analyzes statistics and can literally predict whether stock/crypto will grow or fall. Not only that, they even predict the future of financial life of a person. They are hired by a lot of companies and pay 10 times more than an engineer, although it does have a lot of exams to clear in order to become an actuarist. Story 85. I don't know if it pays well, but here's a job I never thought of existing until I saw it. Mobile shopping cart refurbishment and repair. Went to my local grocery store one day and half the store's shopping carts were surrounding a big box truck in the parking lot. A team of guys was going over all the carts, fixing any that needed fixing. Story 86. Underwater welder. Have an uncle who's been doing it for decades. He typically works for energy companies, works 5 or 6 months of the year, and pulls in $200K and then relaxes the rest of the time. It's apparently pretty dangerous though, so your mileage may vary. Story 87. A relative of mine was a career firefighter, which isn't weird, but he had some weird certs. He was one of only a few people in his area that was certified for confined space underwater rescue, as in wearing scuba gear and going into a small space underwater to find someone. And I don't mean cars in the river. He went into caves that were barely wide enough for his gear. One time he had to go into a flooded basement in an abandoned building after torrential rain to rescue a homeless guy who was stuck in an air pocket. He also went to large businesses/corporations and taught their safety teams how to respond to hazmat emergencies. Edited for spelling errors.